from, and I really want you to hear what I have to say. The tradition of great performers, from Sammy Davis Jr. to James Brown, Jackie Wilson to Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. The story is usually the same, though. You know, these guys work really hard.
He was real good friends with Macaulay Culkin. You remember how that's? Oh, yeah. We're not gonna get into too much here on YouTube talking about these things because YouTube's about burnt up. We're not gonna be fucking with YouTube anymore. Um, but yeah, you know how I said that people said I look just like Macaulay Culkin, and then Donald Trump in Home Alone Part Two, the mention of Home Alone in Dogma, and Macaulay Culkin saying that he doesn't feel like he actually was the one that made that money. He feels like somebody else did it. Come on now. That's a lot of strange things going on surrounding that alone. But okay.
Their craft, but the story ends the same. They usually are broken, torn, and usually just sad. The story is very sad in the end because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. Sony,
CIA.
being being the artist that I am at Sony, I've generated several $billions for Sony. They really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them. We can't let them get away with what they're trying to do because I just owe Sony one more album. It's just a box set, really. So I'm leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony. I own half of Sony's publishing, and I'm leaving them. And they're very angry at me because of it, but the way they get revenge is to try and destroy.
Oh, and guess what? Recently I heard Sony is censoring the internet. Sony is heavily censoring online activity of some kind. Interesting.
My album. And Tommy Mottola is a devil. I'm not supposed to say what I'm going to say right now, but I have to let you in on a secret.
As you heard for yourself, Michael was exposing Tommy Mottola as an evil man who was trying to destroy his career. What appears to have happened between Sony and Michael is that Sony was trying to force Michael to sell the rest of his ownership of ATV Records, but Michael refused. So in my opinion, Sony built a plan to try and force Michael to sell it. Sony offered Michael a deal requiring him to release a greatest hits album through their label. Before Michael started exposing Sony, at this time in his career, as hard as it is to believe, it appears he was struggling financially, as Michael was a very big spender and had recently paid a string of settlements, one of those settlements costing him $20 million. So Michael would eventually sign the deal with Sony Records and took the large advance and eventually spent it. When it came down to releasing his album Invincible, the label purposely didn't market it in order for Michael not to sell well, so he wouldn't be able to recoup the advance, leaving him in debt with the label. This basically means that the label lent money to Michael when they signed him, as this is what an advance is. The label is supposed to get their money back from sales of the album, expecting it sells good. But according to Michael, the label didn't provide a strong enough budget for Michael's team to be able to properly promote the album. This was obviously done on purpose to force Michael into more debt in hopes of forcing him to sell his rights of ATV Records to clear his debt. Instead of Michael doing what the label wanted, he chose to instead expose them, calling Tommy Mottola the devil in 2002, who was the head of Sony Music at the time, one of the most powerful men in the industry.
Imagine what Michael could have done if he didn't get assassinated. How come we didn't hear about none of this? How come I'm just now hearing about this, right? Imagine what he could have done. Obviously, he was being censored before censorship was a thing, right? Obviously, just like me, my whole life, right? But you think it's about Donald Trump. You think Donald Trump is the reason for censorship. Ha, ha, ha.